Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Life-Changing True Stories. Today I bring you a powerful and deeply loving story asterisk. The morning sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, casting golden streaks across the marble floors. Julian Reed stood before the mirror, adjusting his silk tie, while his reflection stared back with uncertain eyes. In his pocket, a velvet box held a 5-carat diamond ring that had cost more than most people earned in a decade. Yet the weight of the ring felt insignificant compared to the heaviness in his chest. Julian was 32 years old and worth over $2 billion. His company, Tech Vision Solutions, had revolutionized artificial intelligence software, making him one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country. He had everything society told him he should want: money, power, respect, and a stunning girlfriend who turned heads wherever they went. But lately, a nagging question had been eating away at him during sleepless nights. Did Emma Torres love him, or did she love what he could provide? Emma was breathtaking in every conventional sense. Her dark hair cascaded in perfect waves. Her designer wardrobe never had a thread out of place, and her smile could light up any room. They had been together for 2 years, meeting at a charity gala, where she had approached him with champagne flutes and a witty comment about the terrible modern art on display. Their relationship had been a whirlwind of private jets to Paris, weekends in the Maldives, tables at restaurants with year-long waiting lists. But something had shifted 3 months ago. Julian noticed how Emma's eyes would glaze over when he talked about his childhood growing up in a trailer park, how his mother had worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. He saw how she would redirect conversations away from his past and toward their next luxury vacation. Her laughter during their intimate moments had started to sound rehearsed, like lines from a script she had memorized but no longer believed in. Last week, Julian had tried to surprise her with a simple picnic in the park instead of their usual 5-star restaurant. Emma had smiled, but her eyes had shown something close to disappointment. She had checked her phone constantly, barely touched the homemade sandwiches he had prepared, and suggested they leave early because she was not dressed appropriately for outdoor activities. That night, as she slept beside him in his king-sized bed, Julian had stayed awake wondering if she would have stayed with him. If he were still that poor kid from the trailer park? The idea came to him during a board meeting. When he was supposed to be reviewing quarterly projections, what if he could see Emma in her natural environment, without the trappings of his wealth? What if he could observe how she truly behaved when she thought he was not watching? The plan formed quickly in his mind, fueled by equal parts desperation and determination to know the truth before he proposed. Marriage. Julian owned a venture capital firm that had invested heavily in Brightstar Marketing, the company where Emma worked as a marketing director. He had never visited the offices, preferring to keep his business and personal life separate. Emma had mentioned several times that her colleagues did not know about their relationship, claiming she wanted to succeed on her own merits. This gave Julian the perfect opportunity. He would go undercover as an intern, and Emma would never recognize him because she had never really looked at people without money or status. Over the next week, Julian meticulously planned his transformation. He purchased affordable clothing from chain stores, got a simple haircut at a neighborhood barbershop instead of his usual celebrity stylist, bought thick-framed glasses from a pharmacy. He created a fake resume under the name Daniel Carter, a recent college graduate looking for his first real job. His connection to the company's CEO ensured the internship was quickly approved with no questions asked. The night before his first day undercover, Julian stood in his closet surrounded by thousands of dollars worth of designer suits and felt like a stranger in his own life. He picked up the velvet box containing the engagement ring and opened it. The diamond caught the light and sparkled with cold fire. He had chosen this ring because the jeweler said it was what successful men bought for the women they loved. But standing there in his temple of wealth, Julian realized he had no idea what Emma actually loved. He closed the box and placed it in his safe. Tomorrow, he would discover the truth, whatever it might be. Julian barely slept that night, his mind racing through possibilities. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe Emma truly loved him, and his doubts were just the paranoia of someone who had been used for his money in the past. Maybe this whole plan was the action of a foolish man about to destroy a good relationship. But deep down in the place where instinct lives before logic tries to explain it away, Julian knew he needed to do this. when his alarm went off at 6 in the morning. Julian did not reach for his custom-made Italian espresso machine. Instead, he made instant coffee in a regular mug and ate toast without the imported jam Emma insisted they buy. He dressed in the cheap clothes, put on the plain glasses, and looked at himself in the mirror. The man staring back was unrecognizable. Good. That was exactly what he needed. The commute, too. Brightstar Marketing took over an hour on public transportation. Julian had not been on a subway in 5 years, and the experience was jarring. People pressed against each other, everyone absorbed in their phones or staring blankly at advertisements. Nobody looked at him. Nobody recognized him. For the first time in years, Julian was invisible, and the feeling was both liberating and unsettling. Brightstar occupied 3 floors of a glass building in the business district. Julian entered through the main lobby, his fake identification badge already prepared. The security guard barely glanced at him before waving him through. As he stepped into the elevator, his heart pounded so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. The doors closed and he watched the numbers climb, 3, 4, 5. Emma worked on the 7th floor. The elevator doors opened to reveal a modern office space with exposed brick walls, open workstations, and the constant hum of productivity. Julian checked in with human resources, received his temporary badge, and was directed to a small desk in the corner of the main floor. From there, he had a clear view of the central area where Emma's office was located. He had barely sat down when he saw her. Emma walked out of her office carrying a tablet, her heels clicking against the polished concrete floor. She wore a cream-colored dress that Julian recognized because he had bought it for her last month in Milan. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she moved with the confidence of someone who knew she commanded. Tension. Julian held his breath as she walked past his desk. She did not even glance in his direction. To her, he was just another nameless intern, invisible furniture in the landscape of her important career. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This was a woman who claimed to love him, who had memorized every detail of his face during countless intimate moments. And yet, she could not recognize him. When he was not dressed in designer clothes and expensive watches, the morning passed in a blur. Of orientation meetings and training sessions, Julian pretended to pay attention while his eyes constantly tracked Emma's movements. He watched her laugh with colleagues, saw her lean in close to whisper to her assistant, noticed how she commanded every space she entered. This was a side of Emma he had never fully seen before, and he found himself both impressed by her professional competence and disturbed by how different she seemed. During the lunch break, Julian followed a group of employees to the cafeteria in the basement. He grabbed a tray and stood in line, blending into the crowd. That was when he first heard her voice cutting through the cafeteria noise. Emma sat at a table with 3 other women, all of them dressed in business casual attire and discussing their weekend plans. Julian found a seat 2 tables away, close enough to hear, but far enough to remain unnoticed. He unwrapped his sandwich slowly, every sense focused on Emma's conversation. At first, it was harmless workplace gossip about upcoming projects and difficult clients. But then one of the women asked Emma about her weekend. Julian's world began to tilt on its axis. Emma laughed. A sound that once made Julian's heart soar, but now made his stomach clench with apprehension. She talked about a dinner reservation at an exclusive restaurant, carefully omitting any mention of who had taken her there. She described the meal in lavish detail, focusing on the price and prestige, rather than the company or conversation. When one of her colleagues asked if she was seeing anyone seriously, Emma's response made Julian's blood run cold. Emma twirled her fork absently, calculated smile playing on her lips as she answered her colleague's question about her relationship status. Julian leaned forward slightly, straining to hear every word over the cafeteria's ambient noise. "I am seeing someone," Emma said, her tone casual, but carrying an undercurrent that made Julian's chest tighten. "He has money, which makes things comfortable. But honestly, sometimes I wonder if comfort is enough." The women at her table leaned in, clearly hungry for details. One of them, a redhead named Cassidy, pressed further. "Come on, Emma. You've been so secretive about this guy. What is he really like?" Emma sighed dramatically, setting down her fork. "He is sweet, I suppose. Too sweet, actually. The man gets emotional over everything. Last week, he tried to surprise me with a homemade picnic. Can you imagine? like we are college students instead of successful professionals. He makes plenty of money, but has absolutely no sense of sophistication. Julian felt his hands begin to tremble. He gripped the edge of the table, forcing himself to remain still and silent. Every instinct screamed at him to stand up, to confront her, but he needed to hear more. He needed to know the full extent of the betrayal before he made any decisions. At least he can afford nice things, another colleague offered. That is more than most guys can say. True, Emma agreed, examining her manicured nails. The gifts are nice. The trips are amazing. But there is this neediness about him that I find exhausting. He actually wants to talk about feelings in his childhood. Who has time for that kind of emotional labor? I have a career to focus on. The women laughed, and the sound was like broken glass scraping against Julian's heart. This was the woman he had planned to marry. This was the person he had opened his heart to, sharing his deepest insecurities and dreams. And she had been laughing about it with her colleagues over cafeteria salads. Cassidy lowered her voice conspiratorially. So what are you going to do? Are you staying with him for the lifestyle? Or is there someone else you are interested in? Emma's eyes flickered toward the elevator banks, and a subtle smile crossed her face. Let me just say that there are other options worth exploring. Options that understand what I need without requiring constant emotional reassurance. Julian followed her gaze and saw a tall man in an expensive suit stepping out of the elevator. He was approximately 40 years old, with silver threading through his dark hair, the confident posture of someone accustomed to authority. Julian recognized him from the company records as Nathan Pierce. The creative director and one of the senior executives at Brightstar Marketing. Emma excused herself from the table, smoothing down her dress as she walked toward Nathan. Julian watched as she intercepted him near the elevator, her body language transforming instantly into something more intimate. She touched Nathan's arm lightly, leaning in to whisper something that made him smile. They stood close together for a moment, closer than professional courtesy required. And then Nathan's hand briefly settled on the small of Emma's back, before they separated and headed in different directions. The gesture lasted only seconds, but it told Julian everything he needed to know. This was not a new connection or a casual workplace friendship. This was familiarity born from repeated intimate contact. Emma was having an affair, and she felt confident enough to display hints of it in their workplace. Julian stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Several people glanced his way, but Emma and Nathan had already disappeared. He dumped his uneaten lunch in the trash and walked quickly toward the restroom. Needing a moment alone to process what he had just witnessed inside the sterile white bathroom, Julian gripped the sink and stared at his reflection in the mirror. The face looking back at him belonged to Daniel Carter, anonymous intern. But the pain in those eyes was purely Julian Reed. He had built a technology empire from nothing, had overcome poverty and doubt and failure. But nothing had prepared him for this particular kind of devastation. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from Emma appeared on the screen. Missing you today, my love. Cannot wait to see you tonight. I have something special planned. Julian read the message 3 times, each word feeling more grotesque than the last. She was texting him sweet nothings, while pursuing another man at work, while mocking his emotional vulnerability to her friends, while treating their relationship like a comfortable arrangement rather than a partnership. Built on love, he typed and deleted several responses before finally settling on, looking forward to it. Short, non-committal, revealing nothing of the storm raging inside him. The afternoon dragged on, interminably. Julian returned to his intern desk and pretended to work on meaningless spreadsheets while his mind raced through possibilities. He needed proof, something concrete beyond overheard conversations and suspicious body language. Emma was clever and calculating, and if he confronted her without evidence, she would find a way to twist the narrative and make him doubt his own perceptions. Around 3 in the afternoon, Julian noticed Emma leave her office carrying her phone and heading toward the stairwell instead of the elevator. Something about her furtiveness triggered his instincts. He waited 30 seconds and then followed, keeping his footsteps light on the concrete stairs. He found them on the landing between the 7th and 8th floors, a rarely used area where employees sometimes went for private phone calls. But Emma was not making a phone call. She was pressed against Nathan Pierce, their lips locked in a kiss that left no room for ambiguity. Nathan's hands moved possessively over her body, and Emma responded with enthusiasm that she had never shown during her carefully controlled moments with Julian. Julian stood frozen, his hand gripping the railing so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He should have felt rage or heartbreak or betrayal. Instead, he felt a strange coldness spreading through his chest, like ice water replacing blood. This was clarity. This was truth. Everything he had suspected and feared was confirmed in this single devastating moment. He pulled out his phone and silently took several photographs. The camera's shutter sound disabled. The images were clear and damning. Emma and Nathan finally separated, adjusting their clothes and exchanging a few whispered words. Before returning to their respective floors through different doors, Julian remained in the stairwell for several minutes, staring at the photographs on his phone. Part of him wanted to delete them, to pretend he had never seen what he had seen. But a stronger part, the part that had built an empire through clear-eyed assessment of reality, knew that documentation was necessary. This relationship was over, and he would need evidence to protect himself from whatever story Emma might try to construct. As he climbed the stairs, back to the 7th floor, Julian noticed someone sitting on the landing above. Grace Martinez, one of the evening cleaning staff who occasionally worked day shifts, sat on a step with a sandwich and a worn paperback novel. She looked up as he approached, her weathered face showing recognition. "You are the new intern," she said, not unkindly. "Daniel, right? I saw your name on the new hire list." Julian nodded, suddenly unable to speak around the lump forming in his throat. Grace studied him with eyes that had seen too much of life to be fooled by surface appearances. "Whatever you just saw," she said quietly. "I saw it too, about a month ago." "Same to people, same stairwell. I am sorry you had to find out this way. Did you tell anyone?" Julian managed to ask. Grace shook her head. "Not my place to get involved in other people's business. But I have been around long enough to recognize when someone is being hurt. That woman, Emma, she has been coming to this stairwell with that man for months. And I have heard her talk about her boyfriend like he is just a wallet with legs." The compassion in Grace's voice nearly broke through Julian's carefully maintained composure. Here was a woman who earned minimum wage cleaning offices, showing more genuine concern for his well-being than the woman who claimed to love him. "Thank you for telling me," Julian said. "It helps to know I am not imagining things." "You deserve better," Grace said simply. "Whoever you really are, whatever your story is, you deserve someone who sees your value beyond your bank account." Julian wanted to tell her everything in that moment, wanted to reveal his true identity and explain the elaborate deception. But instead he just nodded and continued up the stairs. Grace's words echoed in his mind for the rest of the day. Yes. A small light in the darkness that had descended over his heart. By 5 o'clock, Julian had made his decision. He would not confront Emma immediately. Instead, he would gather more evidence, document the affair thoroughly, and then end the relationship on his terms, with proof that left no room for manipulation or gaslighting. He would also contact his lawyers to ensure that Emma had no legal claim to his assets or business interests. That evening, Julian returned to his penthouse and began the meticulous process of reviewing their relationship through a new lens. He checked phone records, credit card statements, and security footage from his building. The patterns emerged quickly once he knew what to look for. Emma had been leaving his apartment at odd hours, claiming work emergencies that never appeared on her official calendar. She had made purchases at hotels and restaurants on afternoons when she told him she was in meetings. The evidence of deception stretched back at least 8 months, possibly longer. Julian also hired a private investigator, someone discreet who specialized in infidelity cases. Within 3 days, the investigator returned with a comprehensive report that included photographs, text message records recovered from phone company backups, and witness statements from hotel staff who recognized Emma and Nathan as regular guests. The most painful discovery came from the investigator's interview with one of Emma's close friends, who revealed that Emma had been openly discussing her strategy of maintaining a relationship with Julian for financial security while pursuing genuine attraction with Nathan. According to the friend, Emma planned to wait until she secured a promotion and better financial footing before ending things with Julian. She was using him as a safety net, while chasing her actual desires. Throughout this process, Julian continued his internship at Bright Star Marketing. He watched Emma perform her daily charade, greeting him as Daniel with polite indifference while texting him as Julian with declarations of love. The duplicity was so complete, so effortless, that Julian began to question whether anything about their relationship had been real. But there were moments of genuine connection that kept him grounded. Grace Martinez would occasionally cross his path during her cleaning rounds, and they developed an unlikely friendship. She never pried into his background or asked personal questions. Instead, she shared simple wisdom accumulated from decades of hard work and careful observation of human nature. "People show you who they are," Grace told him one evening, as they sat in the empty cafeteria after hours. "The question is whether you are willing to believe what you see." Julian found himself sharing more with Grace than he had with anyone in years. He talked about growing up poor, about his mother's sacrifices, about the loneliness that came with sudden wealth. Grace listened without judgment, responding with stories from her own life that reminded Julian of universal human experiences that transcended economic class. It was Grace who finally convinced him to stop delaying the inevitable confrontation. "Staying in this limbo is not protecting you from pain," she said. "It is just prolonging it. Whatever you need to do it with dignity and then move forward." Julian knew she was right. 2 weeks after beginning his undercover operation, he made reservations at the same expensive restaurant where he had planned to propose to Emma. But this time, the velvet box in his pocket contained something very different from an engagement ring. The celestial room restaurant glittered with its usual opulence. Crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light across tables draped in white linen. Julian arrived early, wearing one of his finest suits, his disguise as Daniel Carter completely abandoned. He chose the same central table where he had once planned to begin a new chapter of his life. Tonight, he would end a false one. Emma arrived exactly on time. Stunning in an emerald dress that Julian had purchased during their trip to New York, she kissed him on the cheek, her perfume expensive and carefully applied. As she settled into her chair, Julian noticed how her eyes quickly scanned the restaurant, cataloging who was present and who might be watching. Even in private moments, Emma was always performing. "You look beautiful," Julian said, and meant it. Whatever else Emma was, she understood how to present a perfect exterior. "Thank you, darling," Emma replied, her smile bright and practiced. "You seemed mysterious about tonight. Is there something special happening?" Julian poured wine for both of them, his hands steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "There is something I need to discuss with you. Something important." Emma's eyes sparkled with anticipation. She clearly believed this was the proposal she had been expecting. The culmination of 2 years of carefully managed performance, Julian felt a moment of something like pity for her. But it passed quickly when he remembered the cruelty of her cafeteria conversation and the passion of her stairwell betrayal. "Before we get to that," Julian continued, "I want to tell you about something interesting that happened recently. I spent 2 weeks working as an intern at Bright Star Marketing." The color drained from Emma's face so quickly that Julian thought she might faint. Her hand, reaching for her wineglass, froze in midair. "What are you talking about?" "I disguised myself as a junior intern named Daniel Carter," Julian explained, his voice calm and measured. "I wanted to see you in your natural environment, away from the influence of my wealth. I wanted to know if what we had was real." Emma's mouth opened and closed several times before words emerged. "That is insane. That is a violation of my privacy in my workplace. Why would you do something so manipulative?" "Manipulative," Julian repeated softly. "That is an interesting word choice. Should we discuss manipulation?" "I have recordings of your cafeteria conversations where you described me as needy and unsophisticated. I have photographs of you kissing Nathan Pierce in the office stairwell. I have hotel receipts showing you checked into rooms with him on afternoons when you told me you were in client meetings." Emma's carefully constructed facade crumbled. Her perfect posture collapsed and her face cycled through shock, anger, calculation before settling on defensive indignation. "You had me followed? You spied on me?" "I observed you," Julian corrected, "and I found exactly what I suspected I would find. The question I keep asking myself is whether any of it was ever real. Did you ever actually love me, Emma? Or was I always just a comfortable arrangement?" Tears formed in Emma's eyes, but Julian could not tell if they were genuine or another performance. Of course I loved you. I do love you. What you saw with Nathan, it was just a moment of weakness. The stress of work, the pressure of our relationship, I made a terrible mistake. Multiple mistakes, apparently, Julian said. According to my investigator, you and Nathan have been seeing each other for at least 8 months. That goes beyond a moment of weakness. Your investigator? Emma's voice rose, causing nearby diners to glance their way. You hired someone to investigate me like I am a criminal? I hired someone to discover the truth, Julian replied. And the truth is that you have been using me while pursuing someone else. You have been mocking me to your colleagues while texting me declarations of love. You have been taking my gifts and my support while planning your exit strategy once your career was secure enough. Emma was silent for a long moment, tears now streaming down her carefully made-up face. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and defensive. You do not understand the pressure I have been under. You do not know what it is like to be with someone who has so much when you are still building your career. Everyone assumes I am with you for your money. And maybe at first I was curious about the lifestyle, but I did develop real feelings. Real feelings, Julian echoed. Yet you told Nathan that you were staying with me for financial security while waiting for the right moment to leave. Your friend confirmed that in her interview with my investigator? Emma's face hardened as she realized the extent of Julian's preparation. So what happens now? You publicly humiliate me. You destroy my career? Is that what this dinner is about? Julian reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a leather portfolio, placing it on the table between them. This contains a separation agreement drafted by my attorneys. You will sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding our relationship and receive a financial settlement that is far more generous than you deserve. In exchange, you will make no claims against me or my business interests. And you will not contact me again after tonight. You're paying me to go away, Emma said bitterly. I am providing you with resources to start over somewhere else, Julian corrected. Brightstar Marketing has been notified that my investment firm will be withdrawing its funding unless certain personnel changes are made. Nathan Pierce will be terminated tomorrow for workplace misconduct. Whether you choose to leave as well is your decision. But I imagine working there will become uncomfortable once word spreads about why your boyfriend's investment firm suddenly pulled out. Emma stared at the portfolio as if it might bite her. I could fight this. I could go public with my side of the story, you could, Julian agreed. And then I would release all the evidence I have collected. The photos, the hotel records, the testimony from your colleagues about how you discussed using me. Your reputation would be destroyed far more thoroughly than mine. I am offering you a dignified exit, Emma. I suggest you take it for several long minutes. Emma simply sat there, tears ruining her makeup. Her perfect exterior finally cracking to reveal the calculating opportunist underneath. Finally, she picked up the portfolio and opened it, scanning the legal documents with trembling hands. There is a pen in the folder, Julian said quietly. Sign it, and we can both move on with our lives. Emma signed, her signature shaky but legally binding. She closed the portfolio and pushed it back across the table toward Julian. I hope you find what you are looking for, she said, her voice hollow. I hope you find someone who can live up to your impossible standards. My standards are not impossible, Julian replied, standing from the table. I simply want someone who sees me as a person rather than a bank account. I want someone who does not need wealth to reveal their true character. He left cash on the table to cover the bill, picked up the signed portfolio, and walked out of the restaurant without looking back. Emma remained seated, alone at the table in the center of the room, her emerald dress bright against the white linen, her tears reflecting the chandelier light. Like broken diamonds, the weeks following the confrontation were difficult in unexpected ways. Julian found himself not mourning the loss of Emma, but rather mourning the illusion of love he had built around her. He had wanted so desperately to believe that someone could love him for who he was beneath the wealth that he had ignored obvious signs of her true nature. Work became his refuge again. Julian started spending more time away from executive meetings and fundraising galas. He volunteered at the technology education nonprofit his company supported, teaching coding basics to underprivileged teenagers. He reconnected with old friends from his childhood neighborhood, people who remembered him before he had money and success, and he maintained his unlikely friendship with Grace Martinez. She had left her position at Bright Star Marketing after Julian's investment firm withdrew funding, and the company underwent restructuring. Julian helped her find a better position with benefits and fair pay at one of his subsidiary companies. But their friendship was not about professional connections or transactions. It was about genuine mutual respect and shared understanding. They met for coffee every Saturday morning at a modest cafe near Grace's apartment. Julian would arrive in jeans and a simple shirt, leaving his expensive watches and designer clothes at home. They would talk about everything and nothing, sharing stories and perspectives that came from very different life experiences but somehow always found common ground. Grace told him about raising 3 children on her own after her husband died, about working multiple jobs to keep them fed and housed, about watching them graduate college and start their own families. Julian shared his memories of his mother's struggles, his own journey from poverty to wealth, and his recent painful lesson about the corrupting influence of money on relationships. "Money does not corrupt people," Grace said one morning, stirring sugar into her coffee. "It just reveals who they already are. Your Emma was always going to choose comfort over character. The money just gave her more options to show it." "How do you know when someone is genuine?" Julian asked. "How do you trust again after something like this?" Grace smiled, the lines around her eyes deepening with warmth. "You pay attention to how people treat those who cannot do anything for them. You watch what they do when nobody important is watching, and you trust your instincts, which usually know the truth before your heart is ready to accept it." As autumn turned to winter, Julian noticed subtle changes in himself. He laughed more easily during team meetings. He felt less compelled to prove his worth through expensive gestures. He began to appreciate simple pleasures that he had overlooked during his relationship with Emma. Morning walks through the city, conversations with his elderly neighbors, the satisfaction of teaching a teenager how to write their first computer program. Grace was a constant presence in this transformation, offering wisdom without judgment and companionship without agenda. Julian found himself looking forward to their Saturday coffee meetings more than any business deal or social event. There was something profoundly peaceful about spending time with someone who expected nothing from him beyond honest conversation and genuine friendship. One Saturday morning in December, Grace arrived at their usual cafe with snowflakes melting in her gray hair and a brightness in her eyes that Julian had not seen before. "My daughter just told me I am going to be a grandmother again," she announced, sliding into the booth across from him. "My 4th grandchild. Can you believe it?" Julian congratulated her, genuinely happy for her joy. As she showed him photos on her worn phone of her growing family, he felt something shift inside his chest. This was what wealth truly meant. It's not the accumulation of luxury goods or exclusive experiences, but the richness of human connections and shared celebrations. Grace had more real wealth in her extended family and authentic relationships than he had accumulated in all his billions. "You were staring at me strangely," Grace observed, putting away her phone. "What is going on in that complicated mind of yours?" "I was just thinking about how you define success," Julian said slowly. "I spent my whole adult life measuring it in dollars and acquisitions. But looking at you, seeing how proud you are of your family and how much joy they bring you, I realize I have been calculating wrong this entire time." Grace reached across the table and patted his hand with her calloused fingers. "You are young still. You have time to build the kind of wealth that actually matters. And I think you are already starting to understand what that means." As winter deepened, Julian and Grace's friendship evolved into something neither of them had quite anticipated. There was no dramatic declaration or sudden realization. Instead, there was a gradual recognition that the comfort they found in each other's company went beyond casual friendship. Julian noticed it first during a particularly cold January evening when Grace's heating had failed in her apartment building. He had insisted she stay in one of his guest rooms until repairs could be made, and they had spent the evening cooking dinner together in his massive kitchen. Grace moved through the space with the same humble confidence she brought to everything, and Julian found himself watching her with an appreciation that went beyond gratitude for her wisdom. She caught him staring while she chopped vegetables. "What?" she asked, smiling. "I was just thinking how natural you look here," Julian admitted. "How easy it is to be around you. Grace set down her knife and turned to face him fully. Julian, I need to say something, and I need you to hear me honestly. I care about you deeply, but I am 20 years older than you. I have lived a completely different life, and I do not want you confusing gratitude and friendship for something else because you are still healing from what Emma did. Is that what you think this is? Julian asked, moving closer. Gratitude and confusion? I do not know what to think, Grace said honestly. I know that you make me laugh in ways I have not laughed in years. I know that I look forward to our conversations more than anything else in my week. But I also know that attraction born from pain rarely lasts once the healing is complete. Julian considered her words carefully. Grace was right to be cautious, and her honesty was part of what made her so extraordinary. What if we just continue as we are? He suggested. No labels, no pressure, just honesty and time to figure out what this is becoming. Grace agreed, and they continued their Saturday morning coffee meetings and occasional dinners. But something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of deeper feelings that neither was quite ready to name. Spring arrived with unexpected warmth, and Julian marked the 1-year anniversary of his disastrous undercover internship with a sense of perspective he had never possessed before. The pain of Emma's betrayal had faded into something like relief, gratitude even, for discovering the truth before making a permanent mistake on a bright April morning. Julian and Grace met at their usual cafe, but instead of their regular booth, Julian asked if they could walk to a nearby park. Grace agreed, and they strolled through blooming cherry trees while Julian gathered his courage for what he needed to say. I have been thinking about something you told me when we first became friends, Julian began. You said I deserved someone who saw my value beyond my bank account. You were right, and it took me this whole year to truly understand what that meant. I am glad you have found some peace, Grace said, linking her arm through his. The thing is, Julian continued, his heart racing, I have found more than peace. I have found someone who sees me completely, who challenges me to be better, who shows me what real integrity looks like every single day. Someone who makes me want to build a life rather than just accumulate wealth. Grace stopped walking, understanding dawning in her eyes. Julian, you need to be sure about this. I am not the young, glamorous woman you are used to dating. I come with grown children and grandchildren and a lifetime of experiences that shaped who I am. I cannot be molded into some fantasy of what a billionaire's partner should be. I do not want you to be anything other than exactly who you are, Julian said, taking both her hands in his. That is the entire point. You are real, Grace. You are genuine in a way I never knew was possible. And yes, we come from different worlds, but we have built our own world together over these past months. A world where I am just Julian, and you are just Grace, and everything else is secondary to that. Tears welled in Grace's eyes, but she was smiling. You really mean this? I really mean this, Julian confirmed. I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow or move into my penthouse or change your life completely. I am just asking if we can officially admit that whatever this is between us, it is real and worth exploring honestly. Grace laughed through her tears, a sound of pure joy that made several park visitors turn to look. My children are going to think I have lost my mind. My friends will say, I am having a late-life crisis. But yes, Julian Reed, yes, I would like to officially explore whatever this is. They sealed the agreement with a kiss beneath the cherry blossoms. And Julian felt something he had not experienced during all his time with Emma. He felt completely seen, completely accepted, and completely at peace. The relationship that developed between Julian and Grace, over the following months, defied all conventional expectations and was better for it. They did not move in together immediately or make grand public declarations. Instead, they built something authentic through daily choices, to be honest. Vulnerable and present with each other, Julian introduced Grace to his business associates not as a trophy or an accessory, but as his partner in every meaningful sense. Some people whispered and speculated, unable to understand why a billionaire would choose a former cleaning woman over countless younger, more conventionally desirable options. Julian did not bother explaining to them that those whispers only proved they understood nothing about real value. Grace's children were initially skeptical, protective of their mother and worried about the power imbalance inherent in such a relationship. But they gradually saw how happy she was, how Julian treated her with genuine respect and admiration, and how he showed up consistently without fanfare or expectation of praise. On a warm September evening, almost 18 months after his disastrous undercover operation, Julian took Grace back to that same modest cafe where they had shared so many Saturday morning conversations. But this time, he had arranged for them to have the place to themselves after closing. "This is where it really started for us," Julian said as they sat in their usual booth. "This is where I learned what it meant to be seen as a whole person." "Are you getting sentimental on me?" Grace teased, but her eyes were soft with emotion. Julian reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. But this box was different from the one he had carried for Emma. It was simpler, smaller, less ostentatious. He opened it to reveal a vintage ring with a modest diamond surrounded by tiny sapphires. "This was my mother's ring," Julian explained. "The only piece of jewelry she ever owned. She wore it every day of her adult life, even when we had nothing else. She left it to me when she died, and I have been saving it for someone who would understand its real value." Grace's hands trembled as she looked at the ring. "Julian, I am honored, but are you sure? Your mother's ring should go to someone who understands that love is built through daily choices rather than grand gestures," Julian interrupted gently. "Someone who sees value in effort and character rather than in price tags. Someone who taught me that real wealth has nothing to do with money. That someone is you, Grace." He slid out of the booth and knelt beside the table, holding the ring up in the soft light of the cafe. "I am not promising you a fairy tale or a perfect life. I am promising you honesty, respect, and a partner who will choose you every single day. Will you marry me?" Grace was crying openly now, nodding before she could even speak the words. Yes, of course yes." Julian slipped his mother's ring onto Grace's finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting all these years for the right person to wear it. They held each other in that empty cafe, surrounded by the ghosts of all their previous conversations and the promise of all the conversations still to come. The wedding was small and intimate. Held in the same park where Julian had first confessed his feelings, Grace's children and grandchildren attended, along with Julian's closest friends and business partners. There were no society photographers or magazine exclusives. Just two people promising to build a life together based on mutual respect, authentic connection, and the hard-won wisdom that real love reveals itself not in grand gestures but in daily choices to see and value each other completely, as Julian and Grace exchanged vows beneath an autumn sky. He thought briefly of Emma and the painful lessons her betrayal had taught him. He felt no lingering anger or resentment, only gratitude for the clarity that pain had provided. Sometimes you have to lose an illusion to find the truth. And sometimes the truth looks nothing like what you expected. Years later, when Julian told their story to young entrepreneurs seeking his advice, he always emphasized the same lesson. True wealth cannot be measured in dollars or possessions. It is measured in authentic relationships, in being fully known and fully accepted, in building something real with someone who sees your actual value rather than your surface achievements. And every Saturday morning, no matter how busy their lives became, Julian and Grace returned to that modest cafe for coffee and conversation. It was their ritual, their reminder of where their story truly began. Not in luxury restaurants or executive boardrooms, but in the simple choice to be honest with themselves and each other about what actually mattered. The diamond ring meant for Emma remained in Julian's safe. An expensive reminder of a bullet dodged. But his mother's ring, worn smooth by years of hard work and genuine love, circled Grace's finger with a meaning that no amount of money could buy. And that, Julian finally understood, was the only treasure worth pursuing. Thank you for taking Fed time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to click like. Share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.